Bitcoin going to $1 million per coin. Is it a possibility? You bet it is. We got a lot of stuff out there. Ironically, the information I'm about to share with you paints a pretty bleak, bad picture of the overall financial landscape, but it also gives us time frames. And I want to very clearly state this, that I really want you to stick to the end to pay attention to what I've got to tell you, because there's also a roadmap here for kind of when to buy and when to sell your Bitcoin. Obviously, there's a Bitcoin price prediction in this as well. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. Thank you for your support. If you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button below. Okay, by doing that, you telling me you like this content, and please, please, please drop a like and hit that comment below and just tell me what you think about the video. Okay, so here's what we've got: Bitcoin to $1 million. Okay, big, 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 right? So this is coming via Arthur Hayes. He's kind of a little bit of a figure in crypto. Some people love him, some people hate him. I actually am a pretty big fan of his. I like that he really usually has very grounded, very realistic numbers and things of that nature. So he's basically come out and say, hey, look, 750,000 to $1 million per Bitcoin by 2026 is a doable factor. Here we go. We're going to cover a lot of ground. Stick to the end. A lot to tell you. Here we go. Okay, so he basically goes over and talks about all of the variables, including kind of the bad and the good related to the overall kind of financial landscape. Here we go. So he says basically, like right here in the green, that there's going to be, quote, a financial crisis probably as bad as worse than the Great Depression that's coming by the end of the decade. Again, probably not what you wanted to hear or thought you would hear, talking about Bitcoin going to $1 million, but follow me. There's a logic here. So before we get there, we're going to have, I think, the largest bull market in stocks, real estate, crypto, art, etc., you name it, that we've ever seen since World War II. Now remember, we're in 2023, so we got about 7 years, and he's projecting that by basically within, well, we're almost into 2024, but within 2 years, Bitcoin going to $1 million. Okay, he cites in this purple right here the nearly predictable response of the United States government rushing in to intervene in every economic crisis. You go back, you look, the U.S. government has done this. Okay, now, and probably other global governments, other governments have done this in one shape, form, or fashion as well. In the blue, he explains that essentially creates an endless cycle of central bank printing. He talks a lot about the fact that the ability, or that the Fed in the United States example, but this does happen in other countries, will just turn on the printing presses like they have done before, which ultimately kicks the proverbial can, creates inflation, kind of what we're dealing with, obviously, right here, right now. Okay. All right. So, kind of continuing on, he says, look, this is one of the big key factors to Bitcoin going to $1 million, but also a big factor to that kind of negative scenario that's laying out for the rest of, by the end of the decade, where we could see a pretty significant bad economic kind. So you've got some runway here to try to make some money, stash that away, right, before we get into some bad territory. He says, look, mounting debt, government debt, and out of control inflation. He says, look, mounting government debt needs to be rolled over, and diminished productivity can only be addressed with money printing. Meaning he's saying, hey, look, the government debt is mounting. It's north of $33 trillion right now, insane, out of control. And the government is eventually going to turn on the proverbial printing presses, and they're going to print more money. Not that that's the solution, but that's most likely what's going to happen. So while monetary expansion does lead to bull markets, the consequences tend to be high inflation. We've talked about this. If you print a bunch of money, you're going to create inflation, right? It's kind of a vicious cycle. Right here in the purple. In the first instance, it creates a massive bull market in stocks, crypto, real estate, things that have a fixed supply. Maybe they're productive and have some earnings. But after that, we're going to find out that actually the government cannot save everything. It can't just print as much money as they think they save themselves by fixing the yield and price of their bonds. We're going to get a generational collapse. Again, he's saying by the end of this decade, okay? It's not good news, but again, we have runway. And if you can see Bitcoin going to $1 million, yep, okay, crypto is probably a really good investment. Again, not investing advice. Right here in the yellow, he expects a massive top at some point in 2026. That's kind of like that's the best it's going to be. That's when we're going to see Bitcoin. And oh, by the way, all other cryptos, all other major altcoins going up tremendously in value, right? We know that where Bitcoin goes, the rest will follow. Okay. We talked about here. He talks about how the U.S. government has bankrupted the banking industry. I'm going to keep moving because I want to keep this video fairly short. You can pause the video if you want to read this content right here. Okay. It's just more of kind of similar narratives that we've been talking about already. Ready? Now, here's why he thinks that Bitcoin will go to 750,000 to a million plus. He says, look, despite what appears to be a generally dismal outlook on the global and U.S. economy, everything we've been talking about to do now, he expects Bitcoin price to outperform, placing a target estimate between 750,000 to $1 million per Bitcoin range by the end of 26. He says right here in the yellow, this is the key, chopping around 25 to 30,000, which is where we're at now, right? We get some this year, we're going to get some sort of financial disturbance, and people recognize that the real rates are negative. He's talking about the rates in the open market. So if the economy is growing at a nominal rate of 10%, but I'm only getting 5 or 6%, what he's talking about here is if you want to go put your cash like in a certificate with a bank and you can get 5% on your money. Okay, that's what he's talking about. But he's talking about the fact that the economy may be growing at 10. He said people are going to start looking around and going, wait a minute, I can go put my money in Bitcoin, in crypto, and get a better rate of a return. He's talking about that. But he's also combining it with the global disturbance of all of those economic indicators we talked about, escalating government debt, printing of money, higher inflation, et cetera. Okay. So he's basically saying people are going to start putting their money into Bitcoin, things of that nature, when they realize they can make higher, better returns. Okay. So he says coming into 24, he says either a financial crisis will push rates closer to zero. He's talking about these nominal rates of 10%. Okay. Or the government will keep raising rates, but not as fast as governments can spend money and people continue looking for better returns elsewhere. Everything I've already said, right? In the green. He says also, look, the eventual approval of a Bitcoin ETF, I've talked about that a lot on my channel, will push rates higher, rates as far as the value of Bitcoin. He says that should push it to around 70,000 in June or July of 24. So right there, we're seeing Bitcoin going to 70,000. By the way, again, I'm going to remind you, everything else will go up. Ethereum, Cardano, Polygon, Shiba Inu, Dogecoin, everything else will go up along with it. But he says then major bull run begins, rolling into 750,000 to $1 million on the upside. Here's the last part you needed to stick for. When asked whether the estimated price level would stick, Hayes agreed that 70 to 90% drawdown would occur in Bitcoin price, just like it has after each bull market. Goes north, 750 to 1,000 to $1 million, but then we see a 70 to 90% drawdown. That is, in fact, how Bitcoin does react. Goes up, comes back, pulls back, goes back up over time, comes back, pulls back, etc. There you go. That's what we're seeing. So you now have the ammunition and kind of the roadmap, if you believe it, to say, look, we could see Bitcoin in all crypto assets going up dramatically to really great levels. Bitcoin breaking its all-time high by June or July of 2024, and then by 2026 hitting a peak of 750 to $1 million per Bitcoin, and then a drawback, 70-90% pullback from there. And we've got kind of that bad scenario playing out by the end of this decade. Rolling into 2030, we could see a pretty significant financial crisis. So you need to have banked and stacked all of your cash and your profits and your monies and sold off all your Bitcoin when it hits that high of 750 to $1 million per Bitcoin. There you go. It's what I got for you. As always, thanks for your support. Hit that like button. I'll see you. Bye.